At Aerostar, our mission is to connect, protect, and save lives. And so we find that brings us purpose on why we're here, why we come to work each day. And we can tie the work that we do to how are you aligning with the mission. And then we use those guiding principles that really you come up when you're faced with a decision individually or as a group, that you bounce against the guiding principles.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of DIB Innovators. Today I'm speaking with Jim Nelson, President, Aerostar. Jim, thanks for hooking up with us today.
Yeah, I'm so glad to meet you and really looking forward to this. It's going to be great.
No, and a super exciting company. And to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about your company, and then we can, then I want to learn more about you. But tell me about Aerostar's history and how you guys ended up starting your company.
Yeah, we really have a fun history. We actually started back in 1956 doing stratospheric balloons. We're a division of Raven Industries in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So 4 guys that were part of General Mills in Minneapolis left to start a balloon company, and that and went down into Sioux Falls, into South Dakota, where you have the open spaces, testing different payloads, testing flight suits for the space program back in the 50s, where we had just a number of innovations, from the highest balloon ever at over 160,000 feet to the largest balloon at over 60 million cubic feet. And to get a feel for how big that is, you can, it's 800 feet across. So you could put the
Holy cow
inside the balloon. And it's just incredible. And just the things that we've done over the last almost 70 years in the stratosphere with balloon technology. So that's really been our focus for the last 70 years. A lot of that was for NASA and some of the research. But if you look at the last 10, 15 years, it's really been more of an interest in the DoD because of that technology has really advanced to where we can now navigate in the stratosphere. It used to always be, it's like you would expect. You take a balloon, it gets to where the winds are and it follows the winds. But what we've been able to do is we have a balloon, and it has a balloon on the inside. So we call a ballonnet, that you can fill with cold air. And so it has 2 chambers where you fill and empty the cold air chamber to make the balloon heavier or lighter to go up and down. And so that way you can navigate by finding winds at different altitudes. So we find the sweet spot is somewhere around 50 to 70,000 feet. And so by catching winds at different altitudes, you can navigate the balloon. And when you have balloons that can last over 150 days and you can navigate them, it really opens up what you can do and what you can see from that vantage point, to where we've launched from our plant in Sioux Falls, went out to Hawaii, spent some time in the Galapagos Islands, flew back to South Dakota, spent a couple of weeks over different areas, and then we landed. We cut the balloon down and we can recover it. And bring it back and refurbish it. And it's really exciting about some of the stuff that we can do. Not only is the balloons, we've really advanced from there to provide that whole platform. We have a common ICD. We have our own command and control software, communication systems. We're now getting to logistics with pack-out kits, different logistics for how you can handle a ground station, a launch, recovery operations. So really getting that full supply chain and support infrastructure that goes along with the balloon. And we do so much of it in-house. So it's all American-made and sourced, so we're not relying on others, and that way we can really innovate quickly too. So we've been doing a lot of exciting stuff and really growing the company, having a lot of fun.
No, it sounds like it. And what a cool mission. Well, how did you find yourself, in this, in the balloon space?
Yeah, that's right. Who'd have thought it, right? Yeah. Actually, I grew up on a farm in South Dakota. I learned that value of hard work and teamwork to achieve a goal, and then did my undergraduate math, computer science, then did my graduate work out at MIT in engineering. Then got started into aerospace by working with Raytheon out in Denver. I was part of their leadership development program. We really got a great opportunity to get exposed to a large different portions of a great aerospace company and about leadership. then moved back to South Dakota and ran the Landsat satellite program for about 15 years in different roles, where I started as a ground system engineer to the chief engineer, and then I switched to the government and ran the program for Landsat 8 and then Landsat 9, so 2 spacecraft missions with NASA and U.S. Geological Survey, doing Earth observation, a really important mission there. Then in 2018, I left to join Aerostar and came over there as the director of engineering. Wanted to get back into the commercial industrial space where you can really innovate better. It gets more and more challenging being part of the government. So a place where we could really drive change. And so I started as the director of engineering. Then after 3 years, I was promoted to president. And so I've been running the company since 2021 and really having a great time.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, you have, a great background. Some of the Raytheon, different government, working with different government. How has that shaped your ability or your thoughts in running your company?
Yeah.
That's a big step to go from director of engineering to president.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, and it was that just having the experience in different areas, being part of a services organization, supporting the government, working as a contractor with Raytheon, and then being on the government side, doing acquisition and running programs. It really gave you that kind of ecumenical view where you can kind of see it from all angles. And like in anything, the more that you understand somebody else's perspective, the better off you are. So I've always found in each one of those roles, as you try something different, it's like, well, I've been in your shoes and I know how you look at it. So trying to spend that time and really try to understand what your customer is trying to do, your end user, and then the challenges they go with. So being in the government is very challenging, and dealing with your own bureaucracy. So it isn't as simple as, well, the government needs to make up their mind. It's like, well, there's a lot of challenges that we're all going through, and taking the time to understand the people really get you where you need to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you come up to this space, how do you spend your, like as a president, what is your normal day spent, like percentage of time you spend doing different things?
Oh man, depends on the day. But I would say, yeah, it's a mix between supporting your team and understanding what's going on in the world. Usually start the day with checking on the news and what's happening in the world, then checking in on my team on areas where people are running into issues. And then a lot of it is dealing with some of what is the deal of the day. If there isn't a crisis or a particular thing you have to chase down, it's how can we reinforce the culture that we've built up, spending time with the team. We do a number of volunteer events, so I try to get involved and really get to know the team and be able to help out.
Well, you mentioned culture. I think it's super important. You've mentioned this, so I imagine you do as well. But it's easy to say culture, it's easy to say values, but then how people live is different. What's the key for you? Where have you found the best way to promote a strong culture, and what is that?
Yeah, well, and I'd say culture is probably the most important thing there is, because especially in the DoD, there's going to be ups and downs, and things come from all sides. And the thing that you have is the people. And that is the thing that carries you through. And so the number one piece of it is that you live it. So as you describe and you make out the values, that you better represent every single one of those every way you show up. And one of the things we did just after I'd taken over the company, we've got a really deep, proud history, but we reaffirm, well, what is our purpose and our guiding principles? How do we drive every single day? And so, at Aerostar, our mission is to connect, protect, and save lives. And so we find that brings us purpose on why we're here, why we come to work each day. And we can tie the work that we do to how are you aligning with the mission. And then we use those guiding principles that really you come up when you're faced with a decision individually or as a group, that you bounce against the guiding principles. And it was out to make it very direct and actionable and simple. So we have 5 of them, and I'd like to go through them. Our first is do what's right. So do the right thing. That is for your team members. It's for your customers. It's for your vendors. That the first thing is, well, what's the right thing to do? And then if there's a contract clause or a process or a procedure, update that later. First, do the right thing. So that's the top first thing, always act with integrity. And the second is we dare mighty things. And we came up with that from the man in the arena speech from Teddy Roosevelt of you want to be the one in the fight, trying something new, push the boundaries, make a mistake, get over it, and get better. So we push those boundaries. Our third is to make a difference. And that is about making a difference in the world with our products and services, that it really does make a real difference in the world. And then also in our community. So making a difference in giving back, STEM education, get involved, help out, and really help grow yourself. The fourth one is to own it. So that's personal responsibility. Take that ownership, try to drive a culture that this is your company, you're part of something bigger. So when you can come into work every day and know where you fit and how is it aligned with the mission, that we can drive those decisions, authority, and accountability as far in the organization as possible. And then the last one is simplify. So it's keeping things simple, working with the government. It's always something complicated. It's like, well, are there ways that we can simplify our process? Can we simplify our design such that you can streamline, we can drive down costs, we can bring a capability faster to the warfighter? So those types of that have served us extremely well over the last few years with those guiding principles and asking the team to hold all of us accountable. And I'll have people that will come up to me when a decision of what we're doing with the company is say, was that doing what's right? And I'll say, yes, here's why we were grounded in our guiding principles with that particular decision.
Yeah, Jim, I love that. I've done a bunch of these, and it's hard for people to, and we've gone through in our own company, you create values. And there's a lot of things that are important, but to actually string those into guiding principles that you are able to repeat so that you can memorize them. And, it's not just a list of things on the wall, and then something that directly impacts your ability and how you do work. So I applaud you on that. That was great.
I appreciate that. And it was just like you said, we started with values, and it was like, it's all in the eye of the beholder too. So if you just say, oh, integrity, that's who we are. Well, here's what it means to me when I read the word. And it's like, well, we need to make it more actionable. So that's why we really pivoted from just a list of neat words.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, and I love too, we see this in companies, luckily of the folks that I'm, talking with, but the mission-based companies, people are coming to work more than just getting a paycheck or doing, making their widget. It matters.
Yeah.
And so that's, you started with that. I thought that was great. So
yeah. Well,
kudos to you and your team.
Yeah. And I was really proud of the team of where some of the people are really excited about where we get involved. So we, and volunteer and host different STEM events where we'll bring kids in and share it. And even those that aren't involved in it. And I just heard this the other day. They're like, I love that we do that. It's not my thing, but I'm really proud to be at a company that makes that a priority. And so it's like, because sometimes you get a challenge of, well, who actually has the time and who wants to volunteer, and that it reaches beyond just the people that are directly engaged in it, and it just reflects who we are.
It is. And that's hard. It's hard to do, right? Because there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so much bandwidth. You have critical, important things going on.
Right.
And to make that a commitment is, that's pretty neat. And you find your employees enjoy like that. It's a big part of coming to work.
Yeah. And we talk to people about who we are when we do it. And then we're still small enough. We're about 275 team members. But I do have a one-on-one with all new hires as they come in. And, as part of their orientation is they'll spend a half hour trying to get to know who you are and tell them about what does it mean to be part of Aerostar. And we'll go through our mission and guiding principles and talk through what does it mean to be part of Aerostar. Is just really that welcome, and people really respond well to being part of a company that cares for each other and are all pulling towards the same end goal.
Yeah, that's great. Again, so hard to keep to find that time to meet with every single person, but it matters. We talked about mission. What are some cool things you're doing right now? I mean, you've been around for a long time. You've got balloons. You mentioned the one flying around. What are some of the things you're supporting that you could, share some stories about?
Yeah, we got some really exciting things, and working with the DoD. I know first I'll say we got the Valley of Death. Those are, as you've heard, I'm sure 100 times and know from your own experience, it's very real and always extended. And starting this off of getting into the DoD was all DARPA and early innovation, and it was, does a balloon work? To, okay, now we've proven that out. Let's do some operational exercises, and you get a few exercises under your belt. And then it's like, great news, you passed the test. We love you. We're going to put you in the budget request that will start the program in 2, 3, 4 years. Go get them and make sure you update a bunch of stuff along the way. So, those types of things have really helped us to diversify. So we do a lot with the DoD, but we also have a large piece of our business supporting NASA and other commercial entities. In fact, we're doing a flight right now for NASA and the U.S. Forest Service, doing a wildfire monitoring, which is a great application for what you can do with a balloon. So we launched it out of our facility, or near our facility in Oregon, and launched out over the wildfires in Idaho. And so we're maintaining coverage. We provide LTE for the firefighters on the ground, and we have thermal camera on there so we can identify when new fires take off. And you're up above all of the traffic, and provide that persistent stare has already made a real difference in the operations for that particular wildfire. And being to be able to be up there for weeks can really support the wildfire community and the firefighters. We also have a couple of ongoing missions, some abroad, but also we have a constellation that we're running here in the United States, where we are testing out different navigation of a constellation of balloons, where you have one balloon over an area, and if you're trying to cover a broad area, you can do 2 or 3 balloons, and as the winds adjust, you can move a different balloon into space. And if you think of things like communications, you can see almost 300 miles from 70,000 feet. So you can think of the kind of coverage you can get with that type of a coverage circle. There's a lot you can do, and especially if you want to maintain coverage, is with a constellation of balloons. So doing a lot of exciting stuff there, and trying to support different types of operations that are somewhat unique to things you can do with a balloon.
Yeah, those are great missions. And, to be honest, other than, which is probably super naive of me, or, you had the China balloon that came over, wandering around. It's like, oh, I can't go anywhere. And then I've talked to you guys, and then I've talked to some other folks that no, you can actually manage where they are. This isn't an oopsie. So it's interesting. So in the balloons, you've got this, talking about the technology of the balloon. First of all, it seems baffling to me, to get this balloon, it can stay up there that long. Tell me about the material. Like, is it at risk of puncturing? Does it self-heal? Like, it seems, or maybe you can just have a lot of leakage and it really doesn't matter because it's so big. Like, how does that work? And what are your thoughts and the technology challenges you have with that, with the operations tied into it launching?
Yeah, and those are the things that you learn over 70 years.
Yeah.
In terms of, well, what type of film do you use? Early on, back in the 50s, you just couldn't get the right material that was strong enough and light enough and high enough quality. So we started making our own film, and that ended up being a different division of the company, where you'd make your own film because that was the only way you could get the quality that was required. And then that's the material itself, but then it's also the ability to seal it. So that's an art in itself and a science. And over 50 years of learning the right techniques, how to handle different weights to carry up to the stratosphere. It's not a very benign environment. I mean, up in the stratosphere, it can get down to minus 90 Celsius. So it gets extremely cold. And so then you can get brittle technology or materials, and you can have UV degradation when you're up for a long time. So getting just the right materials, sealing, that whole manufacturing process, the handling when you're on the ground, it's all part of that whole ecosystem. And since we've been doing it for a long time and adding different pieces of it, that really, understanding of how it all works together has really put us in a unique space in being able to bring in the stratosphere.
So you found a film that can go up, and if it does, tear or rip, it'll self-heal?
It depends on, what type of thing you're talking about. But if you're at 70,000 feet, there's nothing to, you don't run into anything. There's nothing there and be a leak that would develop over time. And when a mission is complete, we have a termination scenario. When we're complete with a mission, it tears a big hole in the balloon, and then the payload and the balloon come down on parachutes. And we have models of where we can land the balloons, and we'll usually navigate them to a place to where it's open fields and places where you can recover, and then we'll take it back and fly it again. But that is part of the quality is so important because you can't fix it. So if you
Right.
do have a leak in a balloon, then, that can be mission ending, but that you usually learn that pretty quick. It's either
Right.
something, that infant mortality, but after it's a pretty, if you have a high quality balloon, those can last for hundreds of days.
So from like the balloon side of it, the physical, getting to the stratosphere, where's the technology going? Is it pretty stable, or is that changing with new materials? And where do you see that in 10 years?
Yeah, and that's thing that's changed over the last 10 years as well as lighter materials and availability, and then in the electronics too. So having batteries and solar panels that can handle the right amount of energy, the type of processing that you need to do to predict the weather, because that's also a piece of our puzzle. Is you've got to understand what winds are at what altitudes, so in order to do the navigation. So there's been a confluence of things that have really come together to enable where we are today, and to see some of that continuing and improvements in the system. And then the stratosphere is really an unexplored area that there's a lot of interest and a lot of push to make that part of the overall military and commercial layer. And so moving to solar UAVs, fixed wing, there's been different projects for that, stratospheric airships. And that we have actually flown two of the only powered airships in the stratosphere. First one back in 1970, and then we did again in 2010 in creating a shaped balloon in the stratosphere that has propulsion. So that'll give you a lot more precise navigation and can carry your heavier payloads. And some of the materials and ability to store energy and bring energy through has really improved, reducing the weight. That those are the things on the horizon to where you're going to have more and more things happening in the stratosphere.
Do you have standard balloon sizes, if you will, that then, so I'm a customer, I've got a payload, I'd like to get it up, we create a mission. Do you have like one kind of off the shelf, this is the balloon, or do you custom make these based on the payloads?
It's a little of both. So we do have standard configurations for different altitudes and weights, and then everything's a trade. So what you can go with if you have a larger payload, it takes a larger balloon and it makes the navigation more difficult. But they're really in classes of balloons. We'll have a light that is about the 25 pounds, is for a more tactical that you can do with, we call our two guys in a Jeep. And you can launch with a few people, but it has limited navigation capability. And then our workhorse is what we call our Thunderhead system, is about 125 pounds. And we have a standard ICD. We've flown over 60 payloads, different ones with that. And then we have a larger class, and that's where we've done up to 5,000 to 8,000 pounds. And that's where you get the really big balloons. And then they have a lot more restrictions on, it takes so much more helium. The logistics are a lot more challenging, and your navigation is limited with just that much mass. But there is different size and scale and trades of what do you want to do, and really tying that back to your mission. What is it you're working to do? And so we've really centered around that. Thunderhead has been, that sweet spot of where there's a number of payloads that have the right size, weight, and power. And with that altitude, provides a lot of different coverage and operations that the military needs.
That's neat. How long does it take to launch one? So you get the Thunderhead, you line it up. How big is it when it stretches out the ground, and how do you get that thing rolling?
Yeah, so we can launch off of basically anything that's about 80 by 80. So you can do it off a helicopter pad. We've launched off of Navy destroyers, a number of different Navy ships, and launched out of a church parking lot. And so we're pretty tactical in that, and can bring our launch kit, as I was mentioning before, on logistics with containerized systems, and relocate a launch site. And when we arrive at a launch site, we can be up within a few hours. Just really complete from zero to launch. And we've done it under an hour in some cases. And then once you get the balloon laid out, the balloon's about 80 feet in length. And so you lay the balloon out, and then you fill it with about 10 to 12% free lift. So it looks really small on the ground, because as it goes up, it expands with the pressure. So it kind of looks like a jellyfish as it's taking off. And then when it gets up into the stratosphere, it pressurizes and fills out the full suite. But as soon as you launch it, it goes up at about 800 feet a minute. So it takes about an hour to get to its final altitude, where you start begin operations.
Yeah, and it's just such a neat capability to be able to do that and now maneuver them. And if you've got a fleet of them with the right sensors and capability, I imagine from highly contested areas, it's a very unique capability set. How cost-wise, is it expensive?
Yeah, and that's where, another unique thing that you provide with a balloon is it's much cheaper than what you can do with an aircraft or a spacecraft. So it really does fit in the middle, and it can really help with the asynchronous part of the warfare. Is at 70,000 feet. I mean, about you can get an F-22 up there, but that's about it. Maybe a U-2. That's our 70.
U-2. We've seen some of those pictures.
Yeah, that's right. But most everything else, and it takes a quite expensive weapon to reach 70,000 feet. And the amount of things, it's more expensive to defeat than it is to deploy in many ways. And so, the things you can do with a suite of balloons really shifts it in a very much an asynchronous way. So the actual cost of the balloon and the operations, which also is somewhat counterintuitive until you think about it, is it gets cheaper the longer you keep it. Whereas, you do an aircraft, and every time you're out there, you got the people and the fuel. And as soon as you launch the balloon, now it's up there, and all you need is somebody on a console to run it. There's no fuel, there's no operating costs, and now your cost per flight hour just significantly drops. When you're talking about constant coverage 24/7, it's a very powerful financial story. And that can also be in a couple of ways of how you deploy it too. There can be a situation where you have a parking orbit. So let's say you put up 20 balloons over the Pacific Ocean, and then you leave them over the ocean. And then when it's wildfire season, you bring 3 balloons from the fleet and use them. So in that respect, they're always ready, and then you navigate them over. The other is you have them in reserve, and you have a dozen of them on your ship. And so if you need a local communications coverage, then you can go from your ship and you can have, let's say, a tactical deployment of a strategic asset. So if you're looking at, trying to get something strategic can be very challenging, and having that in your local control is extremely powerful for a ship captain.
Yeah. Is the technology, advancements, specifically AI, you're talking about a guy sitting at a console, how quickly are you getting where this is becoming pretty automated?
Yeah.
To manage large groups or the whole multiple constellations.
Just like anything with automation is they work within each other. Of as soon as you add some automation, there's more things you can do. So you can do more with less, but what you're really multiplying is the things that you can do. So now a human can monitor multiple balloons, but you're spending less time monitoring and now looking at what type of operation. You can look at health and safety. So we've automated a lot in terms of using the telemetry and all the data about the balloon, about different wind patterns, what's happening at different altitudes, how much power you have available, how long will it take you to get to that altitude. And so very sophisticated models, and you'll let the machine do that kind of guesswork. And then it provides you back with your best opportunity to, how should we maneuver? And so we spent a lot of time on automating and really adding more smarts to let the balloon make the decisions, which, like any kind of automation, can be a challenge to when to let go. But the good news is it doesn't move that fast. So, so if you let it go a little bit, you're taking your hand off the wheel. You can. It's a little easier to do than it is, say, if you're driving your car.
Is a lot of your comm through satellites? So like controlling them?
Yeah, we have multiple communication paths. We have some SATCOM through a couple of different providers, as also we have line of sight. We have a few different mechanisms, and those are for redundancy, some for security and data bandwidth. So depending on what particular mission or what type of operation you're doing is which one you'd use.
Are there any challenges? I'm not a stratospheric guy, as you said, I haven't flown that high. But as far as like the wind patterns, are they pretty standard across the globe? And are there any areas that are really challenging to fly? Like I'm just thinking, North Pole, for example, where the wind patterns make it challenging to operate in those areas.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are challenges, but they're different. So it's less tumultuous than the troposphere, where all the weather is. We're above any of the clouds, above any of the even thunderstorms, unless they're really bad, won't make it to 50,000 feet. So you're up above all of the weather, but there are wind patterns, and there's a lot of changes at different altitudes, and they're not super consistent. So the good news is it's less violent than the troposphere, but there isn't that much data either. There are not very many organizations that are out trying to gather wind data and study the wind patterns in the stratosphere. They just want to know if it's going to rain tomorrow. So, the type of resolution in terms of time and space that you have in the stratosphere, there isn't a lot of data to work with. And so we've used multiple models, and then we merge that data together. There's also the radiosondes that are weather balloons that they launch on a regular cadence. So we pull in all the information of what's happened in the stratosphere. And like anything with wind, it ages. So we use that as part of our algorithm to find the best winds at the best altitudes at the specific time. So it's really that 4-dimensional space, and then you learn a lot where you're at. So if you have another balloon in the vicinity, you have a lot higher confidence in what's happening at that altitude. But there is some diversity, which is what's important in the for navigation. And, it is called the stratosphere because there's stratified layers of wind. So knowing what layer is a different wind, and you can go up 5,000 feet or 1,000 feet, can change it completely different directions. So understanding where there's different wind patterns, sometimes we'll get what we'll call a wind event, where at all altitudes, they're all heading the same direction. So those, you just have to find the slowest one and it'll blow you off course until you can loop back. And we had an operation where we were in South Dakota and we were down and we got blown out over the Pacific Ocean and we had to loop up and come back over. So your big loop backs are a lot bigger than with most other operations.
Yeah, that's the new one. Instead of like, how long does it turn around an aircraft carrier? Now it's
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
turn around a balloon with a wind event.
Yeah, we had an operation we were doing, and we were in Sioux Falls, and then we had to navigate down to Texas. And the fastest was to go through Ohio. So the quickest distance between 2 points in the stratosphere isn't always a straight line. So you just find the patterns that's the quickest is sometimes a little bit circuitous, but that's part of the game.
Yeah. What are like the wind speeds up there? Or is it, I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah, much slower. So you can get to, the few knots up to, you can get some that are 80 and 100, but it's pretty rare. So I'd say you're in the low double digits, maybe 20, 30 knots around there where you'll get a higher wind, but there's no shear.
Well, that's why I was curious. Do you ever have wind shears? How does the balloon handle wind? Because it's so, long.
Yeah.
Tall.
Well, it doesn't because you're up above and we're always going with the wind. So you don't have it. They're not that there really isn't a wind shear problem. You're flowing through and it's flaccid on the way up. So as you go through the jet stream, it's not as big at that point, and it's going through pretty quick and it's pretty resilient as you go through the jet stream and stuff.
Perfect.
I'll say that the challenge is because it is a different operation than say an aircraft or a spacecraft. That's a real challenge in deploying it to the military, and for a couple of different reasons. One is there isn't a MOS, there isn't a group that says we're the balloon guys. You either have pointy aircraft or you got spacecraft, and it's kind of neither one. So if you're which area of the military is the right place that will have the right operation, the support, and how will that work out? With the new multi-domain task force, they have been establishing that balloon operations as part of their mission, but it doesn't fit well within just the overall infrastructure of where does it fit within the different PEOs. So that's a challenge. And the other is it doesn't behave like an aircraft or a spacecraft. So there are definite advantages and disadvantages, and it's just different. So you can't predict exactly where you're going to go, but you can maintain over an area. So it isn't go from point A to point B and you give a flight plan that says, I'll go exactly here. When you look at, well, I want to stay coverage over over Denver, it looks like a bowl of spaghetti if you were going to follow the flight path, but you won't know exactly where you are at any exact time. And then you have some of those wind events. So just the integration with the infrastructure and how you monitor it, how do you operate it, how does it integrate with the rest of the enterprise is a really important part of our challenges, working with the military to explain what it can and can't do. So you can take most advantage of the capability.
Yeah, so I can see why, that idea of a constellation, multiple balloons, or having them in reserve so that you're able to, you're a planner, you need intelligence, you've got multiple avenues, plus other aircraft or systems or capabilities. But yeah, there's definitely capability there. We mentioned the DoD again. So if, for folks that are looking to break in and work with the DoD in, we've got these SIBRs and different OTAs, different fundies events. What's been your biggest lesson learned, and how has it gone, working through that valley of death, if you will?
I would say, we took a little different approach at Aerostar than had in the past. Versus going for direct government funding, is came of at it more as a commercial item. And so it would be, well, what's the mission you want to accomplish? And then we do a lot of the development on R&D funds, and then we do a demonstration of the mission. There's pros and cons of doing that, but the challenge when you have just government funding is you're chasing usually one customer with one mission, and it's all on what are they trying to demonstrate. And transitioning from that to an exercise to an operational can usually be a really big challenge, because in DARPA or some of the technologies, they're usually trying to prove out one piece of the puzzle. And then when it gets picked up by an operational exercise, they're looking for something broader, and you sometimes have to rethink how you're going to use that technology. So while it can be a catalyst through SIBRs and OTA and some of those, is to try to look beyond, and how is this really going to get deployed, and where can you augment it, whether it's doing some internal R&D, is it different customers, to look at how is this really going to get deployed in the field. Because having something cool, there's a lot of stuff that never made it out of out of DARPA, because they did something cool, and then actually running that into the full operation just couldn't happen.
That's interesting. Definitely opportunity there, but it is a tough thing to navigate for sure.
Yeah.
So Aerostar, 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, where are you going to be? Where's your biggest efforts of, growth and opportunity?
And we really feel that we're at a turning point in the stratosphere. I mean, the Chinese balloon really was an awareness thing, but some of that did. We did get popular. We had a balloon actually where it was shot down. We had one flying about 100 miles from there, and we said, "Hey, we're the one with ADS-B on. Don't shoot this one down." On an IRAD flight. But that really has brought the attention, and there is a push to operationalize the stratosphere. So we really think, there's been a number of exercises that have been published that have been using high altitude balloons. We really feel that we are in that transition to it being an operational capability for the military, and we feel we're really well positioned to lead a lot of that. And that isn't just through our Thunderhead balloon, but also testing out payloads that are going to be used either on balloons, our balloons, someone else's balloons, on a UAV. Is that, now we've got a proven system that you can bring that technology into the stratosphere, using that, and really that transition to full operations. I think over the next 3 to 5 years is really gonna, and it's gonna be a lot more democratized in the stratosphere. And for us, it's really that focus on the duration, the navigation. Can we improve? How can we make our balloons last longer? Like everybody, we still have our challenges, and not all the balloons last as long as we want. Sometimes the winds do things we weren't ready for. So, trying to advance our technology, our understanding, and working with our end customers to meet their needs and help them meet their mission. So it's a pretty bright future, and I see a lot of exciting things going on in the stratosphere over the next 3-5 years.
Who thought ballooning would be cool again?
Yeah, I know, right? It's one of those. As a little kid, it's like, I love balloons. It's like, who would have thought it did? Yeah, that's right. Aerostar, we make ballooning cool again.
I think that could be a new punchline. Make a couple t-shirts.
That's right.
A big red t-shirt. Or
that's right.
Red baseball.
We do say, that not even the sky's the limit. Because and the sky's down below us now. So it's really.
I would also think it's, for a lot of sensor developers, just to get it up and tested in that, environment before you stick it on a satellite, for example, when it goes. I think there's a lot of unique unique
Yeah.
opportunities.
And it's always, yeah, it's fun when we have a new sensor that's coming in because it's always different from where they came. And, like anything, after you've done it a while, there's the same things like, oh, here's how it works on the aircraft. It's like, well, then here are your challenges. You don't have any air movement. There's about 1% of the ambient air to work with. And it's not moving. So thermal control is a real challenge, especially for something that was built and hung off of an aircraft. So some of those thermal challenges, keeping things hot, keeping things cold, gets really cold overnight. And so it's a lot of uniqueness, and usually takes a couple of times before you can wring out the unique things that are in being in the stratosphere.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, I really appreciate it. Your time, unfortunately, coming to an end, but if folks want to continue to watch Making Balloons Cool Again, where would they look?
Yeah, and say check us out on our website at aerostar.com, and follow us out on LinkedIn and all that other social media stuff. But we've always got a lot of exciting stuff going on, and keep an eye out on for us. Look up in the sky, see if you can find yourself a little dot, and
Absolutely.
watch for us on Flight Radar 24.
Well, this has been a lot of fun, man. I've learned a lot. I wish you guys the best, and let's stay in touch.
That's great. I just really appreciate it. This is a lot of fun. It's great to meet you, and thanks for doing this.
You bet. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.